Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the sixth session of the LPEA 10-year, 10-minute interviews. Today is a very special day, not only because it's sunny in Luxembourg, but because we're hosting for the first time a woman. And we know that our goal is to abolish International Women's Day, as we heard the last time I saw our distinguished guest, Julie Becker, who's the Deputy CEO of the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. Good afternoon, Julie. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Raja.
It's great to have you with us, and it's a big honor for many reasons. First of all, you're a role model for many of us at LPEA and in the finance world. You've had two decades of successful career, first as a lawyer, bridging all kinds of trades in compliance and risk and legal projects in Luxembourg, in banks, but in public and private sector. So it's quite a rich background. And you've been now with the stock exchange for 7 years, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you rose very fast through the ranks to now be the number 2, which is fantastic. And please keep inspiring us all. This is not the reason why we invited you today, although it's part of the reason. The reason we have you with us is because you've been voted one of the global shapers, if I can call this, by Global Landscapes. You were deemed to be an inventor of green finance, not least because you launched the green exchange in Luxembourg as part of the stock exchange, which was a big innovation. And we're going to talk about green finance, sustainability, and try to understand within this complex world of what you do, what it means for our community in private equity and beyond. So very happy to host you today, and let me know if I forgot anything to mention in terms of your background and interest. I should also say maybe that you are a founder as Luxembourg Stock Exchange of LuxFlag, which is a partner of ours that we support very much in their ability to label funds of all asset classes.
Well, thank you very much, Raja, for these very kind words, and thank you also for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here and to share what we did at the exchange to contribute to a more sustainable world. Which is very, very important for me.
Yes, we see it's a personal passion as well of yours, which is all the more inspiring. So Julie, as you know, we have 10 minutes, just you and me. We have 3 questions to cover during this time, and then we will open to the audience who can ask questions live for you to answer afterwards. The first question is about this whole story about the green exchange. Why and how did you set it up in 2016? I think from what I read in the press, it represents 230 billion in assets issued. But can you tell us what this represents and why you did it?
Yes. Well, to be very precise, and as of today, because of this exceptional months linked to the COVID-19 crisis, I'm really proud to say that now we display more than 700 securities for a total amount of 265 billion US dollars.
Fantastic. But in 4 years?
In 4 years, absolutely. Well, yes, in 4 years. September 2016. We launched this green exchange as a response to the Paris Climate Agreement and to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the famous SDGs. Our objective was to unlock sustainable capital and help redirect capital flows towards sustainable development projects. And we started with green bonds, and we then extended the platform to social and sustainability bonds. And we also extended the platform to SRI funds, so ESG funds, social funds, and green funds, of course. And because of the COVID-19 crisis, we recently also display as social bonds some COVID-19 response bonds that have been mainly issued by multilateral development banks, amongst other EIB, but also World Bank, IFC, African Development Bank, the Development Bank of the Council of Europe. And it has been an exceptional month in March.
Yes, we want that was going to be my second question, Julie. Thanks for transitioning. You decided to waive the listing fees of these COVID-19 bonds. who are the issuers that you are listing? Who could do it? How does it work? I mean, maybe it is of interest to our PE community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So these COVID-19 response bonds are first social bonds. So maybe for those who are not used to that kind of terminology, a social bond is a conventional bonds, but for which use of proceeds are 100% social. So they are aimed to finance social projects like healthcare, social housing, vaccine, social developments globally, but also education, gender diversity. And in those categories of projects, we now have COVID-19, and this has been accepted as such by the International Capital Markets Association last week to allow issuers of social bonds to issue specific COVID-19 response bonds. And they are mainly issued by development banks, multilateral development banks, like I said, but also national development banks like KfW, Nordic Investment Bank. They can also be issued by sovereign, of course. And I really hope that lots of sovereign will onboard, but also, of course, by corporates. Lots of corporates are also mobilizing to help to contribute to a more sustainable world and to fight this COVID-19 crisis.
Can you give some names, maybe examples?
Yes. Well, so about the multilateral development banks, I already mentioned them. About corporates, you have, for instance, Iberdrola. You have lots of energy companies also acting in to develop a more sustainable world. But those companies also issue less COVID-19 bonds are much more issued by multilateral development bank and by the public sector. While you know that funds are needed, huge amounts of money is needed, and so the private sector should also on board. And this is really needed, especially because there are so many projects that could make really a difference. And all they need is money. And like the Vice President of the European Parliament said, without money, you can dream, but with money, you can act. So I hope I can also convince private equity investors to also act in this field.
I think we should follow up on this sentence, definitely, Julie. A third question for you is still, you know, for the more skeptical among us, and to be honest, a lot of traditional private equity investors have been now wondering what this green finance is about. Do you think, and of course it contradicts a bit what you just said, do you think that it was one of these good days trends and people are now have to be focused on the basic business and it was a bit of a fad, or is it there to stay, the whole green finance world?
It will definitely stay. It has to say we have no other choice. I remember a few years ago, I was also explaining why green finance was going to stay. Because it's not only about COVID-19, it's not only about climate change, it's about everything change. We really have to realize that our actions are today strengthening our own existence. So we can no longer sit and watch. We really have to act, and to act now. And you remember, Rajat, 10 years ago, Wall Street, or 12 years ago now, Wall Street was already on fire. And what has become as a financial crisis has contaminated all economic sectors. But for me, it was not only a financial or an economic crisis, it was an identity crisis. And this has been brought up by Greta and these new generations with, who really need to act with purpose. They strive for meaningful lives and meaningful jobs. They listen to their peers rather than to financial advisors. They don't want to be. They don't want to own. They want to use. They want to belong to a community, and they want to live in a better world. And we cannot ignore that. And as investors, and not only young investors, we all want to know now where our money is going. We want to know what kind of impact our investments will have for the future generations. So we have no other choice than to think green and sustainable when we think about the recovery.
I think it's very strong words and powerful comments, Julie. Thank you. Let's move a little bit to the Q&A to delve in a little bit more into your speech. So if we are a corporate that has the green finance on its agenda, where should they start and how do they come to you in the first place? A corporate or a financial investor for that matter?
Well, corporate or financial investor, so usually the exchange is right in the middle between issuers and investors. What we bring to issuers is visibility and the diversification of their investor bases. While for investors, we bring transparency and information in order to allow them to make informed investment decisions. So any kind of issuer can join, of course, the exchange and display on our platform their debt. You have to know that in Luxembourg, we are not an exchange like any other. We are more listing venues and a trading venue. We are not domestic. We have no domestic market, as you know, in Luxembourg, only international market. And we list mainly debt. We are a debt listing venue and we should not be called at the end a stock exchange, but rather a securities exchange. But any kind of issuers who wants to raise funds can list on our exchange and benefit, especially if it's about green or social or sustainable funds, of the visibility and the notoriety of the green exchange to be displayed. And very concretely, to be pragmatic, what you need to do is to establish a prospectus, of course, that needs to be approved either by the exchange itself or by the CSSF, depending on the market you choose, and then to be displayed on the green platform. You also need to provide us with additional documentation explaining how you will issue, what kind of projects you are going to select, and then to commit us to provide us with additional information on a yearly basis of how you raise funds and how you have allocated the funds you have raised through your bonds. And that's extremely important in sustainable finance because sustainable finance is about transparency. It's about how the issuers deliver on its commitments. And this is extremely important for investors.
That means the liability of KYC and any transparency related measure falls on your shoulders or the issuer?
About investors, you mean?
For instance, or about whatever transparency requirements you have?
Well, the transparency requirements that the issuer has in sustainable finance is about delivering on its commitment. You know, when he's raising funds through a social or green bonds, is committing to allocate the funds he raised through these bonds to a specific project, which could have, should have an environmental impact, for instance. And then the issuer on a yearly basis needs and commits to report on how he has allocated the funds and what kind of impact at the end of the project will have at an environmental or a social level.
Thank you, Julie. What is the biggest challenge in your job, especially in these days of working remotely, but in general, when it comes to promoting green finance and the green exchange?
Well, I think that when it comes to promoting the green finance, it's all about finding the right balance. We need to encourage maximum of issuers and investors to on board, but we should be inclusive rather than judgmental, and we clearly need to show the way and to encourage everybody to make a step. So at the same time, as an exchange, we protect investors and we need to bring them maximum of transparency and information. So we need also to make sure that issuers comply with the best market practices and the maximum level of information. So it's all about finding the right balance.
Yeah, I understand that, especially in these days. I have another question for you, actually two in one. Yeah. One is about competition. I mean, you must experience competition from other listing marketplaces, but also if we want to promote you also to the PE world, what should we say and what are your competitive advantages that we can use as arguments? And I have an idea before we hang up of this great conversation that could maybe help increase the profile of LSE among our audience.
Well, first of all, Raja, if I may ask you a favor, please do not tell LSE when you mention LuxSE, because LSE is our main competitor,
yes.
London Stock Exchange.
Yes, but
especially recently.
I thought of it, but I thought if we say LSE for Luxembourg, then you're the main one then. But I should say LuxSE.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
LuxSE for Luxembourg.
Point taken.
Thank you very much. So our main competitors, well, London is more and more positioning itself also on the green finance era, not only for green equities and green indices, for which they are very well known, but also on the green bond segment. And but they did not used to be our main competitor because they are clearly a trading venue and not a listing venue. But they understood that that sustainable finance is a future, and that finance will be sustainable by default. So they are also positioning themselves in this matter so far, and acquiring FTSE and Refinitiv recently will help definitely them to provide, for instance, ESG data and to set up ESG indices. So they will be very active also in this area.
Okay, thank you. And so how can we help you promote a LuxSE better, also within our PE community, or our clients, investors, the whole value chain?
Yeah, well, I think we are a very small exchange, and that's why we are extremely nimble and agile. And for instance, the Luxembourg Green Exchange was born in only 9 months. And we were the first, but we are still the unique platform entirely dedicated to all sustainable financial instruments. We are the only one where you can find a centralized database of information. We have an existing of 90 years plus, which means lots of expertise, lots of knowledge, multilingual, of course, like all of us in Luxembourg. And also we are committing to a very fast track process. We try to remain as quick as possible, as reactive as possible. And what we are targeting is commitment and excellence. Of course, innovation and digitalization are also part of our DNA.
So that means if an issuer wanted to come to you from the moment they speak to you the first time to the listing moment, how long can it be if everything runs smoothly?
Well, we commit to list in maximum 3 days. So
3 days.
Yeah, and we list. So we commit to come back to our issuers in maximum 3 days for the first comments on the prospectus, and we list 99% of our securities in 2 days, 24 hours, because they are mainly tranches, and our issuers trust the Luxembourg Stock Exchange since years. And that's something that might interesting, but be interesting for you as well, is that maybe you know that when another exchange raise funds like Deutsche Börse or London Stock Exchange in the past, they choose the Luxembourg Stock Exchange to list their funds, their own funds.
Interesting. So that's some story to remember, and I didn't know you existed since 90 years. I think on this note, Julie, one idea I just had, and would be great to have you as a member of honor of LPEA, because of your role, because of the innovation around green finance, which is coming top of our agenda. So if you accept this very modest title, we would very much welcome you. We also have a lively community of very talented women who look for inspiring ladies like yourself. And as I told you, we also try to be closer to Lux Flag and work together, because the whole world of PE is also changing and trying to capitalize on the green finance trends. But I think we still need a lot of explanation. So we may call upon you once in a while to come and explain to our world how you do it.
Well, first, thank you very much. It's a huge honor, and well, I accept with pleasure to try to provide you with everything that I can provide, and I will come with pleasure to explain you more about sustainable finance. And I have to say, I recognize that this is very complex and that we have to pay attention not to remain a closed club. The taxonomy, I'm sure you have heard about it, have made a lot of noise. It's just a classification. It's just a dictionary to explain what kind of activities can be considered as green enough for the European Commission. But yes, I will share my experience with pleasure with all of you.
I think it's wonderful to think, thanks to Julie and LuxSE, we can demystify green finance, and we can also understand the differences between sustainability, impact, ESG, SDGs, and all the acronyms that when Julie describes them sound much more approachable and actionable. Julie, a word of conclusion?
Well, we all need to act. We can all contribute, and we need to act now. That's
great, but before you go, we have one more question actually. What is the minimum amount that is needed to raise a green bond through you? I mean, to list a green bond through you, sorry.
Yeah, 200,000 US dollars are needed.
Okay. And then the fees still make sense to pay? I don't know how expensive it is.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's a bit difficult to explain because it all depends on the amount that is raised and the maturity of the bond. But so it can be between 2,500 and more, depending on the maturity of the deal.
But the average that you have on listing for a single bond? It's not 200.
Yeah, it's really difficult to say. You know, of course it is. It's the average, I would say, between 3,000 and 4,000.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I think we learned a lot. I'm sure this will be followed up upon. If you agree, Julie, and we have more people contacting us to know more, you'll tell us how to direct them to your organization so we can follow up on this.
Thank you very much, Raja. They are more than welcome on the exchange, and we will be very happy to help and support.
Thank you, Julie. And for the viewers, next Monday, we're hosting the CEO of Loft, Nazir Zubairi, so continuing the series. And I want to make this call to viewers. If you know of an inspiring leader and opinion leader like Julie Becker, please send her to us because we want to interview women in finance and private equity related areas. Thank you, Julie, and well done. This was great.
Thank you very much, Raja.